June 4th, 1943, a date etched not in blood, but in the quiet tremor of a pencil across paper. Una Fitzia Vera Burkhardt, a name lost to the grand narratives of war, yet about to be irrevocably bound to its most subtle victory, sat hidden within the belly of a Pullman coach, his journal a forbidden confidant. The words he penned, barely legible in the dim light leaking from under a drawn shade, were treasonous in their very essence, a seed of doubt planted in the meticulously cultivated field of Nazi certainty. He wrote haltingly, the syllables forming a stark, unsettling truth. The Americans must be lying. A simple declaration, perhaps, yet possessing the seismic force to topple empires. He paused, the pencil hovering above the page, the silence within the carriage amplified by the rhythmic chugging of the train. Could it be true? Could the endless stream of propaganda, the years of carefully crafted lies, be nothing more than elaborate charades? He looked out the window, past his own reflection, into the vast, unwavering Texas night, and the answer, blazing with unapologetic brilliance, was undeniable. The American landscape, a defiant testament to abundance, glowed with an intensity that mocked the carefully enforced darkness of the Reich. Electric lights, an extravagant display of untapped power, erupted from every farmhouse, danced along every street corner, winked from every shop window. A constellation of defiant sparks flung across the velvet cloak of the Texas plains. 10 o'clock, the hour when Germany would have been swathed in a mandatory suffocating blackness, a cloak against the imagined threat of Allied bombers. Here, light reigned supreme, a symbol of unbridled industrial might. In the fatherland, blackout regulations imposed since 1940 had become a suffocating symbol of the war itself. Even before the conflict, rural electrification was a distant dream, a mere whisper for barely 20% of German farms. A stark contrast, a chasm of disparity that threatened to swallow Una Fitzia's carefully constructed worldview whole. The train lurched, its wheels singing a song of American progress, and Una Fitzia refocused, attempting to reconcile what his eyes beheld with the indoctrination he had swallowed whole. He and 1,850 other veterans of Erwin Rommel's vaunted Afrika Korps had arrived, not crammed into cattle cars like livestock, not relegated to the indignity of freight wagons, but transported in cushioned Pullman coaches, replete with dining services and sleeping berths, a luxury, an extravagance that bordered on the surreal. He remembered the journey, the initial disbelief that had slowly given way to a gnawing sense of unease. The food, plentiful and rich, the clean linen, the attentive service, it had all felt like an elaborate performance, a carefully staged attempt to impress. But as the miles blurred past, as the train sliced through the heart of America, the performance became reality, the stage transformed into the world itself. The entire population of Mexia, Texas, a small town steeped in the traditions of the American South, had turned out to witness their arrival, a sea of faces, curious and wary, lining the tracks. None of them, not even the most astute observer, could have possibly comprehended the profound psychological transformation that this moment, this seemingly insignificant event would trigger. A systematic dismantling of Nazi ideology, brick by agonizing brick, through the sheer, overwhelming force of American industrial prowess. The mathematics of Allied victory, Una Fitzia realized with a chilling certainty, were not being scribbled on battle plans or whispered in clandestine meetings, but were being forged in the relentless fires of American industry, manifested in production statistics that would soon shatter every assumption these soldiers held about their enemies, their homeland, and their cause. The collapse, he understood now, had begun not on the battlefields of North Africa, but in the quiet corners of their own minds, slowly, inexorably corroding the foundations of their belief. The surrender in Tunisia, the humiliation of defeat, these were mere preludes to the true battle, the war for their very souls. The surrender on May 13th, 1943 in Tunisia, was the beginning. General Jürgen von Arnim, Rommel's ill-fated replacement, capitulated, surrendering approximately 250,000, somewhere between 250,000 and 275,000, German and Italian soldiers to the Allied forces, a staggering loss, a crippling blow to the Axis war machine. The numbers themselves were fluid, shifting as scattered units, pockets of resistance clinging to a desperate hope, continued to surrender over the following days, the desert sand soaking up the last vestiges of their shattered dreams. Among the captured were the Wehrmacht's most seasoned desert fighters, men who had once driven the British back to the very gates of Egypt, soldiers who had earned the grudging respect of even the legendary Montgomery himself. Men who had stared death in the face and laughed, now found themselves prisoners, their fate hanging in the balance. Their world, once defined by the roar of engines and the sting of sand, now constricted to the confines of barbed wire and the watchful gaze of their captors, and among them, a figure who would unknowingly become a chronicler of this internal revolution, Hetman Friedrich Radke, holder of the Iron Cross First Class, a veteran of the brutal French campaign, wounded twice in the unforgiving crucible of North Africa, a soldier's soldier, hardened by years of relentless conflict. His diary, a treasure trove of unfiltered observations, unearthed decades later in the sterile depths of the National Archives, would provide historians with an unparalleled account of the psychological impact of American captivity on German soldiers. A visceral, deeply personal narrative of disillusionment and reluctant awakening. The journey, the slow and often agonizing trek from the humiliation of defeat to the stark light of revelation, had begun in the teeming port of Oran, Algeria, a chaotic landscape of makeshift camps and displaced lives. As Radke, along with 30,000 other prisoners of war, waited under the relentless African sun for the ships that would carry them across the vast Atlantic, the subtle yet insidious encroachment of American efficiency had already begun to chip away at their carefully cultivated preconceptions. The United States Army, a seemingly inexhaustible machine of logistics and organization, processed thousands of prisoners daily with a precision that far surpassed anything the Wehrmacht had ever achieved, even at the zenith of its power. Identity cards were meticulously photographed and filed. Medical examinations were swiftly and efficiently completed. Inoculations were administered with a detached professionalism, and, perhaps most shockingly, the rights guaranteed by the Geneva Convention were clearly and concisely explained in fluent German by American officers who had been specifically trained for this precise moment. It was a display of competence, of meticulous planning, that was both unsettling and undeniably impressive. But the first true shock, the moment when the carefully constructed facade of Nazi propaganda began to crack in earnest, came with the food, a seemingly trivial detail, yet one that resonated deeply with men who had endured years of dwindling rations and unrelenting hardship. Obergefreiter Hans Mühr, captured with the remnants of the once formidable 21st Panzer Division, wrote to his mother, his words carefully censored by American authorities, a letter that would only see the light of day 8 long months later. In the cage at Oran, he confessed, his handwriting betraying the lingering disbelief. While we waited for ships, the Americans fed us better than we had eaten in 6 months of desert warfare. White bread, real coffee, meat twice a day. We thought it was propaganda, that they were trying to impress us. He paused, the words heavy with realization. We didn't realize this was their standard military ration. The sheer, almost obscene abundance of it all, the casual disregard for scarcity, the casual availability of luxuries they had long since forgotten, began to sow seeds of doubt. The Liberty ships that would carry them across the vast and perilous expanse of the Atlantic were themselves monumental testaments to American industrial might, floating embodiments of a seemingly limitless capacity for production. The SS Robert E. Peary, a name now synonymous with American ingenuity and relentless efficiency, had been constructed in a mind-boggling 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes at the bustling Kaiser shipyards in Richmond, California. A feat of engineering that would have been dismissed as impossible propaganda if the Germans had ever learned of it. These vessels, churning out at an astonishing rate of 3 per day at the peak of production, were returning from their tireless mission of delivering vital supplies to the beleaguered European theatre. Rather than sail back empty, a waste of precious resources the Americans seemed incapable of tolerating, they carried human cargo, a grim procession of up to 30,000 prisoners of war per month by the summer of 1943. The ships were symbols of the New World. They were symbols of progress. They were also symbols of terror to the German soldiers on board. The American military used them as a scare tactic, not a means of transportation. This all was a part of the psychological destruction of the German soldiers' minds. They were showing them they had lost, which, in the long run, would be the ultimate destruction. The beginning of the end for Nazi Germany, Una Fitzia thought. The seeds of this destruction had been planted. The war machine continued to pump out propaganda, but it could not overcome the evidence that was in plain sight. He looked out the window again, the train still chugging along. How much longer could he pretend? How long could he resist the light? He would soon see just how much brighter that light could be. The 2-week Atlantic crossing, a seemingly endless stretch of ocean and uncertainty in July 1943, provided the second and perhaps most crucial phase of this insidious psychological demolition. Confined to the claustrophobic quarters of the Liberty ship, surrounded by the constant churn of the engines and the unwavering gaze of their American guards, the German prisoners of war were unwittingly enrolled in a floating classroom, a harsh and unforgiving school of disillusionment. Feldwebel Kurt Zimmermann of the 90th Light Division, a meticulous observer and diligent recorder, kept a detailed account of his experiences in a series of letters to his family, precious missives that miraculously survived the ravages of war and found their way home after repatriation. His words, poignant and unflinchingly honest, offer a rare glimpse into the gradual erosion of deeply ingrained beliefs, the slow and often painful realization that everything they had been told was a lie. The ship's crew, he noted with a mixture of awe and simmering resentment, disposed of more food waste each day than my entire company had received in weekly rations during the final, desperate months in Africa. The waste itself was a spectacle, a jarring display of obscene abundance that defied comprehension. American sailors, seemingly oblivious to the value of such sustenance, casually discarded half-eaten steaks, tossed away whole loaves of bread, and poured gallons of milk that had merely sat too long down the drain. Acts of casual profligacy that sent waves of bewildered disbelief rippling through the ranks of the prisoners. They did this openly, Zimmermann wrote, his words tinged with a hint of bitterness, without thought, not to mock us, but because to them this waste meant nothing. Their supply was limitless. The sheer scale of American logistics, the seemingly inexhaustible pipeline of resources that flowed across the Atlantic, was a revelation that shook the very foundations of their worldview. The ships themselves, these ubiquitous Liberty vessels that had become synonymous with American industrial power, became floating textbooks in the harsh realities of war and the economic disparity that separated the combatants. The prisoners, driven by a mixture of curiosity and a desperate need to understand the forces that had led to their defeat, discovered that the vessel carrying them was merely one of our 2,710 Liberty ships that would ultimately be built during the war. A staggering number that dwarfed anything Germany could even dream of producing. Each one, they learned with a mixture of awe and creeping dread, required 250,000 individual parts, meticulously assembled from components manufactured in 32 different states, a testament to the intricate web of American industry, the interconnectedness of a nation operating at peak efficiency. The engines, They overheard from talkative American guards engines that seemed to throb with the relentless pulse of American power were built in 3 separate factories, each churning out 900 horsepower cylinders that were then assembled in ports that had barely existed 2 years earlier. The sheer scale of it all, the audacity of the ambition was breathtaking, a stark reminder of the vast chasm that separated Germany's limited resources from America's boundless potential. Lieutenant Colonel Wilhelm von Stobern, whose aristocratic Prussian family had served in every German war since the days of Frederick the Great, a man steeped in tradition and unwavering loyalty to the fatherland, would later write in his memoirs, his words heavy with the weight of reluctant acceptance. As our ship approached the American coast, I watched the radar antenna rotating above the bridge. This technology, which we believed only we, and perhaps the British possessed in limited quantities, was standard equipment on a cargo vessel. He paused, the silence of the page amplifying the impact of his words. It was then I first suspected that Germany had already lost the war. The radar antenna, a seemingly insignificant detail, became a symbol of technological superiority, a silent testament to the innovative spirit and industrial might of the United States. The realization, stark and inescapable, that the Americans possessed technological advantages that Germany could not match, was a devastating blow to the carefully cultivated myth of German invincibility. The journey across the Atlantic, far from being a mere transfer of prisoners, became a slow and methodical dismantling of Nazi ideology, a chipping away at the carefully constructed edifice of lies and propaganda. Every wasted morsel of food, every glimpse of technological superiority, every whispered conversation with their American guards served to reinforce the uncomfortable truth that they had been deceived, that their leaders had led them down a path of destruction based on false promises and blatant lies. The prisoners, trapped within the confines of the ship, were also trapped within the confines of their own minds, wrestling with the uncomfortable realities that were slowly, inexorably, unravelling their carefully constructed worldview. The waves crashed against the hull of the ship, the constant rhythm a metronome counting down the days until their arrival in America, a land that, for many of them, represented both fear and a strange, unsettling hope. They didn't know what to expect, but they could have never imagined just how much their lives were about to change. The journey across the Atlantic Ocean was not merely a physical relocation, it was a journey into the heart of disillusionment, a voyage that would ultimately redefine their understanding of the world and their place within it. The boat was their prison, their school, their confessional, their therapist, and their way into a new world. The boat was the beginning of their second life. August 2nd, 1943, the day the horizon transformed from an endless expanse of ocean to the tangible reality of the American coastline, a day that would forever be etched in the memories of the German prisoners of war as the moment when the last vestiges of Nazi propaganda about American industrial weakness were irrevocably shattered. The first sight of America, as the Liberty ship navigated the intricate waterways leading to Norfolk Naval Base, Virginia, was an assault on the senses, a visual and auditory bombardment that overwhelmed their carefully cultivated expectations. The Norfolk base sprawled across a staggering 4,300 acres, its docks stretching for miles like concrete tentacles reaching out to embrace the sea, its cranes colossal metal behemoths, ceaselessly loading and unloading dozens of ships simultaneously. It was a scene of frenetic activity, a symphony of industrial efficiency that dwarfed anything they had ever witnessed in Germany. In a single day, this one port, this single hub of American naval power, handled more tonnage than the entire German port of Hamburg, the fatherland's largest and most vital maritime centre, managed in an entire week. The sheer scale of it all, the relentless pace of production, the seemingly effortless coordination of men and machines was both awe-inspiring and deeply unsettling. Gefreiter Johann Weber, a factory worker from the Ruhr Valley before his conscription into the Wehrmacht, a man familiar with the grime and relentless demands of industrial labour, counted a staggering 47 cargo ships in various stages of loading or unloading, a chaotic ballet of human and mechanical effort that seemed to defy the very laws of physics. Each crane, he noted in his secret diary, the words carefully concealed beneath the banalities of everyday observations, lifted loads that would have required a dozen men and horses in Germany, a testament to the power of American engineering, the relentless pursuit of efficiency. They moved with electric power, smoothly, continuously, without the choking coal smoke that perpetually blanketed Germany's industrial cities, a visual reminder of the environmental cost of the fatherland's relentless pursuit of rearmament. The prisoners, still reeling from the sensory overload of the naval base, were formed into neat columns for the march to the waiting trains, a slow and orderly procession that wound its way through the heart of the facility. Along the route they passed parking lots, vast expanses of asphalt teeming with civilian automobiles, hundreds upon hundreds of them, belonging to the ordinary dock workers, the men and women who kept this colossal machine of war running. In Germany, private automobile ownership remained a privilege reserved for the wealthy elite, the upper echelons of the Nazi Party, and the select few who had managed to amass significant wealth before the war. The Volkswagen, the people's car promised to the German people since 1934, remained a distant propaganda dream, a tantalizing vision that never materialized for the vast majority of the population. Fewer than 1,000 ever delivered to civilians. Yet here, in what Nazi propaganda had relentlessly portrayed as a decadent, collapsing America, ordinary labourers drove to work in their own cars, a symbol of economic prosperity and personal freedom that was both jarring and deeply unsettling. The prisoners continued to stare in disbelief, their carefully cultivated image of American poverty and economic hardship crumbling before their very eyes. But nothing, not even the overwhelming scale of the naval base or the sheer abundance of automobiles, could have prepared them for the trains themselves, the gleaming steel behemoths that awaited them, promising a journey into the heart of America. These were not boxcars, the cramped and dehumanizing cattle cars that had been used to transport troops across Europe, nor were they the infamous 40 and 8-inch wagons, designed to carry 40 men or 8 horses, that had become synonymous with the brutal realities of war. Instead, they were full passenger coaches, the kind reserved for civilian travel. Pullman cars with padded seats that converted into comfortable sleeping berths, dining cars with pristine white tablecloths and gleaming silver cutlery, observation cars with panoramic windows that offered breathtaking views of the passing landscape. It was a level of luxury that seemed almost obscene, a stark contrast to the hardship and deprivation they had endured for years. Hedman Radke, the chronicler of their psychological transformation, wrote, his words carefully chosen, "We boarded like tourists, not prisoners." He paused, the weight of his observation heavy on the page. The American guard seemed almost embarrassed by the comfort. One sergeant, visibly uncomfortable with the opulence of the accommodations, apologized that the air conditioning wasn't working properly in their car, a seemingly trivial detail that spoke volumes about the vast difference in standards of living between the two nations. Air conditioning, Radke wrote, his words dripping with incredulity. In August, we had believed such luxury existed only in Hitler's personal train. The 3-day train journey from Norfolk to the prison camps of Texas and Oklahoma, far from being a mere transportation exercise, would prove to be more destructive to Nazi ideology than any military defeat. A relentless assault on their carefully constructed worldview that would leave them questioning everything they had ever believed. The journey had only just begun. As the trains rolled through Virginia, their steel wheels singing a song of American abundance, the prisoners pressed their faces against the windows, desperate to reconcile the reality they were witnessing with the propaganda they had been fed for years. They were peering into an America that simply could not exist, according to everything they had been told, a land of poverty and decay, crippled by economic hardship and social unrest. Instead, they found a land of vibrant prosperity, a nation brimming with industrial might and a standard of living that seemed almost unimaginable. Every small town they passed, every seemingly insignificant hamlet, blazed with illumination, a defiant display of electric power that mocked the enforced darkness of the Reich. Martinsville, Danville, Greensboro. These were not bustling metropolises, but rather modest communities that, in Germany, would have been lucky to boast a single electric street lamp. Yet here they displayed illuminated shop windows, their shelves overflowing with goods, electric signs that crackled with vibrant energy, and houses with lights burning in multiple rooms, a testament to the widespread availability of electricity and the comfortable lifestyle it afforded. The trains passed factories running night shifts, their windows glowing with the orange heat of industry, their parking lots teeming with automobiles, even at the stroke of midnight. A visual reminder that American industry never slept, that production continued relentlessly, fueled by an inexhaustible supply of resources and a seemingly limitless demand. Obergefreiter Muir, the son of a staunch Nazi party bloc leader in Hamburg, wrote in a letter, unearthed in 1987, his words laced with a growing sense of unease. "We passed through dozens of cities that first night. Everyone had more electricity than all of Hamburg." He paused, the realization dawning on him with chilling clarity. "The guards told us this was normal, that every American town had electricity since the 1920s. I called him a liar. He just shrugged and said we would see." The casual nonchalance of the American guards, their unwavering confidence in the face of disbelief, was perhaps the most unsettling aspect of it all. They were not trying to convince them, not engaging in propaganda or boasting. They were simply stating facts, presenting the reality as they knew it, and allowing the prisoners to draw their own conclusions. In Roanoke, Virginia, the train stopped to take on water and coal, a brief respite that offered the prisoners a glimpse into the efficiency and technological superiority of the American railway system. They watched, mesmerized, as American railway workers performed in 30 minutes what would have taken 2 hours in Germany. Automated coal loaders that effortlessly transferred tons of fuel, electric water pumps that gushed with seemingly limitless volume, mechanized lubrication systems that eliminated the need for manual labor. Every aspect of the operation demonstrated a technological superiority that was both undeniable and deeply disturbing. More disturbing still was the casual wealth of the workers themselves. They wore leather boots that would have cost a German labourer 2 months' wages. They drank Coca-Cola from glass bottles and tossed the empties into bins without a second thought. They smoked cigarettes continuously, stubbing them out half-finished. Acts of casual profligacy that spoke volumes about the disparity in economic conditions between the two nations. Gefreiter Hinrich Müller, an electrical engineer from Siemens before the war, a man intimately familiar with the intricacies of power generation and distribution, calculated that the single railway yard they stopped in used more electricity in 1 hour than his entire district in Berlin used in a day. A staggering statistic that highlighted the vast chasm of industrial capacity that separated Germany from the United States. "The waste was magnificent," he wrote, his words tinged with a mixture of awe and despair. They left lights burning in empty buildings. Electric fans ran in vacant rooms. It was the carelessness of infinite resource. As the trains crossed into Tennessee and Kentucky, the prisoners encountered American industrial power in its full, unadulterated glory. Through the windows, they watched endless factories stretch as far as the eye could see, each one larger than anything most of them had ever seen in Germany. Sprawling complexes of steel and concrete that hummed with the relentless energy of production. The Alcoa aluminum plant in Tennessee stretched for 3 miles along the river, its electric furnaces consuming a staggering 175,000 kilowatts of power, more than the entire city of Munich, a symbol of America's insatiable appetite for aluminum and its ability to generate the power needed to fuel its industrial machine. Near Louisville, the train slowed as they passed the rubber town complex, where synthetic rubber plants had sprung from empty fields in just 18 months. 4 massive facilities, each employing thousands of workers, producing 800,000 tons of synthetic rubber annually. Germany, despite inventing the process, had never managed more than 120,000 tons in its best year, a stark reminder of its limited resources and its inability to compete with American industrial might. Oberleutnant Erich Hoffmann, a chemist from E.G. Farben, Germany's leading chemical conglomerate, understood the implications immediately. He knew the processes, the equipment, the scale of production. In a post-war interview, he recalled, "I knew those plants. I could see the distillation columns, the catalytic crackers. Each facility was more advanced than anything we had built, and there were 4 of them just in this one location. They told us there were dozens more across the country. The enormity of it all, the sheer scale of American industrial capacity, was beginning to sink in. The prisoners were witnessing a reality that contradicted everything they had been told, a reality that threatened to shatter their carefully constructed worldview." The trains pushed further into the heart of America, past landscapes of prosperity and light that they never knew existed. The trains, relentless in their journey, continued to carry their captive audience deeper into the American heartland, each mile a further nail in the coffin of Nazi ideology. The closer they got, the harder it became to deny the truth. The trains passed Ford's Willow Run plant outside Detroit, a monumental testament to American industrial prowess visible from miles away. This single factory, built in a mere 9 months, was producing a B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes, a feat of engineering and logistical coordination that defied comprehension. At peak production, 42,000 workers assembled bombers from 1,550,000 parts, manufactured by 1,500 subcontractors, a vast network of interconnected industries, all working in concert to produce a single, devastatingly effective weapon of war. The plant consumed 2.5 million square feet of floor space and used more electricity than the entire German city of Cologne, a staggering statistic that highlighted the sheer scale of American industrial ambition. Hauptmann Wehrli, a Luftwaffe pilot shot down over Tunisia, pressed his face against the window as they passed, his eyes wide with disbelief as he struggled to reconcile what he was seeing with the propaganda he had been fed for years. He counted 17 B-24s in various stages of completion visible from the train, a silent testament to the relentless pace of production. We had been told American planes were inferior, hastily built, would fall apart in combat, he later confessed. But I could see the precision of the assembly lines, the quality of the construction. These were not inferior aircraft. They were simply built faster than we could imagine possible. The closer the trains penetrated into the American interior, the more complete became the destruction of Nazi mythology. The land stretched before them, one huge advertisement for its own success. In St. Louis, they crossed the Mississippi River on the Eads Bridge, a marvel of engineering that spanned the mighty waterway, while below them, barges carried more grain than the entire German harvest of 1942, a reminder of the vast agricultural bounty of the American Midwest. The prisoners could see grain elevators stretching along both banks, each one holding enough wheat to feed a German city for months, a testament to the abundance and efficiency of American agriculture. Unteroffizier Karl Schmidt, a farmer's son from Bavaria, wrote in his diary, his words laced with a mixture of awe and envy. The Americans transport food as we transport ammunition, in endless quantities, without concern for loss. He paused, the realization dawning on him with chilling clarity. I watched them loading a single barge with enough wheat to feed my entire village for 5 years. The crane operator was eating a sandwich with meat thicker than our weekly ration. In Kansas City, the train stopped at a massive stockyard, a sprawling complex of pens and corrals where tens of thousands of cattle waited for slaughter. The smell of meat-packing plants filling the air for miles. German POWs, who had subsisted on a meagre 200 grams of meat per week in Africa when they were lucky, watched American workers eating beef sandwiches during their lunch break, a scene of casual abundance that seemed almost surreal. "They ate meat like we ate bread," wrote Gefreiter Paul Fischer, his words tinged with a hint of bitterness. No, that's wrong. They ate meat like we wished we could eat bread. The American guards, perhaps sensing their hunger and disbelief, bought them hamburgers from a stand near the station, meat, cheese, and vegetables on white bread for 15 cents. He bought 20 of them without thinking, paid with a single dollar bill, Fisher wrote. This was not special. This was their normal food. The journey was only half over. The arrival at the prison camps themselves provided the next level of cognitive demolition, a final assault on the carefully constructed facade of Nazi ideology that would leave many of the prisoners questioning everything they had ever believed. Camp Hearn, Texas, built in a mere 4 months, housed between 3,000 and 4,800 prisoners in conditions that exceeded what most of them had known as civilians: wooden barracks with electric lights, flush toilets, hot showers, and steam heat. Each building was constructed with more lumber than entire German villages possessed, a testament to the abundance of resources in America and the willingness to provide even enemy prisoners with a comfortable living environment. The camp hospital astounded the medical personnel among the prisoners. Oberstleutnant Dr. Friedrich Bauer, chief surgeon of the 164th Light Division, found himself in a facility better equipped than most German civilian hospitals. X-ray machines, surgical equipment, pharmaceutical supplies that had been unavailable in Germany since 1941, all standard provision for enemy prisoners. They had penicillin, Doctor, Bauer would later testify. This miracle drug that we had only heard rumours about, they used it freely, even on prisoners with minor infections. German soldiers were dying for want of basic sulphur drugs, and the Americans were giving us their most advanced medicine without hesitation. The camp kitchen became another classroom in American prosperity. Prisoners assigned to cooking duties discovered walk-in refrigerators, electric mixers, automated dishwashers, and gas ranges that could prepare meals for 5,000 men. The daily ration included fresh milk, eggs, meat, vegetables, and white bread, quantities that German civilians hadn't seen since 1939, a stark reminder of the vast disparity in living standards between the two nations. Feldwebel Otto Krebs, a former hotel chef from Munich, wrote, "Today, we threw away more food than my family has seen in 3 years. Not spoiled food, simply excess. The American regulations require we prepare 10% more than needed to ensure every prisoner receives full rations. The surplus is discarded. I wept as I threw perfectly good bread into the garbage. The casual abundance of the American prison camps, the willingness to provide even enemy soldiers with a level of comfort and care that was unimaginable in Germany, was a powerful indictment of the Nazi regime and its lies about American weakness and decadence." He stared out the window of the train. He would soon be inside of this camp. He would soon experience the truth for himself. He knew what that would mean. It would mean that everything he had stood for was a lie. It would mean that everything he had fought for was for nothing. It would mean that his leaders had betrayed him. It would mean that his country was doomed. It would mean a new life. By September 1943, the labour shortage in American agriculture led to the employment of POWs in fields and factories across the country, a decision driven by necessity that would prove more destructive to Nazi ideology than any propaganda program could have achieved. Groups of prisoners were trucked daily to work sites, travelling through the American heartland without blindfolds or restricted routes. They saw everything. The endless fields of corn and wheat, the factories running 3 shifts, the shops full of goods, the parking lots full of cars, the houses with refrigerators and radios, all testaments to the prosperity and industrial might of the United States. At a cotton gin outside Houston, Unteroffizier Herbert Lang watched a single machine process more cotton in 1 hour than his entire village could have handled in a month using traditional methods. A stark reminder of the efficiency and technological superiority of American agriculture. The gin was powered by electricity from the Colorado River Authority, part of a rural electrification program that had brought power to 90% of Texas farms by 1943. A testament to the government's commitment to improving the lives of its citizens, even in rural areas. The farmer who owned the gin was nobody special, Lang recorded. Not aristocracy, not a party member, just a farmer. Yet he had electricity, running water, a truck, a car, and a tractor. His workers, including the Negroes, ate lunch from boxes containing more food than German workers received in a week. And this was normal. Every farm we passed was the same. In Nebraska, prisoners worked in sugar beet fields, witnessing agricultural mechanization that defied comprehension. A single combine harvester, they learned, could do the work of 100 men. The fields stretched to the horizon, each one larger than entire German counties, a testament to the vastness of American agriculture and its ability to feed the world. The farmers spoke casually of yields that would have been fantasy in Germany. 60 bushels of wheat per acre compared to Germany's 30 on the best land. A stark reminder of the superior soil and agricultural techniques of the United States. Gefreiter Wilhelm Hoffmann, working on a farm outside Scottsbluff, wrote, "The farmer's son, a boy of 16, drove a tractor worth more than everything my father had earned in his lifetime." He paused, the realization dawning on him with chilling clarity. When I mentioned this, the boy laughed and said it wasn't even a particularly good tractor. His father was waiting for a new model from John Deere that would be even better. The casual affluence of the American farmers, the willingness to invest in the latest technology, and the sheer abundance of their harvests was a powerful indictment of the Nazi regime and its romanticized vision of rural life. The most devastating revelations came to those prisoners who worked near or in American factories. While Geneva Convention rules prohibited direct war production work, POWs could work in industries that freed American workers for military production. This technicality allowed thousands of German prisoners to witness American industrial capacity firsthand. At a Campbell soup factory in New Jersey, prisoners watched production lines that processed more tomatoes in a single day than most German factories handled in a month, a testament to the efficiency and scale of American food processing. The facility operated with a skeleton crew of women and elderly men, as most young workers were in the military, yet production exceeded peacetime levels, a testament to the ingenuity and dedication of the American workforce. Stabsfeldwebel Ernst Wagner, who had worked in a German food processing plant before the war, documented the experience. Everything was automated, he wrote. Electric conveyor belts, automatic filling machines, steam cookers that processed hundreds of cans simultaneously. One elderly woman monitored controls that managed what would have required 50 workers in Germany. She did this while listening to a radio and drinking coffee. Near Detroit, prisoners unloading coal at a power plant gained glimpses of the automotive industry's conversion to war production. The River Rouge, complex, visible across the water, employed 100,000 workers producing jeeps, aircraft engines, and tanks. The plant consumed 1.5 million kilowatts of electricity daily, more than the entire city of Hamburg. "We could see the parking lots," wrote Obergefreiter Franz Kellner. "Thousands of cars belonging to workers in Germany. Even our officers rarely owned cars. Here, factory workers drove to work. The guard told us many workers owned 2 cars, one for work, one for family use. We thought he was mocking us. He was not. By winter 1943, the cumulative impact of these observations was producing what American intelligence officers called ideological collapse syndrome among the prisoners. the carefully constructed facade of Nazi ideology crumbling under the weight of reality. The Special Projects Division, the secret re-education program run by the Provost Marshal General's Office, documented increasing numbers of prisoners requesting access to American newspapers, books, and educational materials. They knew that what they knew wasn't the truth. They were grasping for something to hold on to. They were looking for answers. The train continued. Major Paul Noland, a member of the monitoring team, reported in December 1943. The prisoners no longer argue when shown production statistics. They have seen too much. The most fanatical Nazis have become quiet. They still maintain loyalty to Germany, but no longer speak of victory. Many openly question what they were told about America. The camp newspapers produced by prisoners themselves began reflecting this transformation. Der Ruf, the Call, published at Fort Kearny, Rhode Island, gradually shifted from defiant nationalism to discussions of democracy, economic systems, and post-war reconstruction. The editors, carefully selected anti-Nazi prisoners, found their audience increasingly receptive. They were planting seeds in fertile ground. Lieutenant Hermann Gut, captured with the 10th Panzer Division, wrote in a letter that passed American censors, "We were told America was a mongrel nation, weak, divided, controlled by Jews, incapable of military prowess. Every day I am here, I see the opposite. This is the most organized, unified, and powerful nation on earth. We were told fairy tales by criminals." The train was coming to a stop.